I have the honor of introducing Dr. Joel Parrott, the President and CEO and Staff Veterinarian of Oakland Zoo. He received his Bachelor of Science and Doctorate of Veterinary Medicine from Colorado State University. He was born in the Adirondack region of New York State, and Dr. Parrott spent his high school years in Miami, Florida, before moving to Colorado for his college education. Upon graduation from veterinary school, he completed an internship at the Denver Zoo and went into private practice in Castro Valley. His specialty was exotic animals, and he was a consulting veterinarian for the Oakland Zoo until 1984, when he became the staff veterinarian and assistant director. A year later, he became the executive director at the zoo, and in 2011, he became the president and CEO of the Oakland Zoo. Dr. Parrott has overseen many new developments at the zoo in the past 20 plus years. He is an avid conservationist and naturalist, and views the role of zoos as instrumental to environmental education. He is married to Laura Becker, a practicing veterinarian, and they live in Montclair and have 2 children, Tyler and Lindsay. Dr. Joel Parrott is also a fellow Rotarian. So please give a warm virtual welcome to Dr. Parrott, coming to us live from the Oakland Zoo.
Well, great. Thank you for the introduction. That's great. It's great to be here. I've been in Oakland number 3 since 1985. So I've been in Rotary a long time too. And it's really we're all the Rotarians, just the greatest people and the greatest club going, because it gives back to the community so much. We're a recipient of that here at the zoo, but I think it's the global stuff, the regional stuff, the local stuff that, I treasure Rotary. And so it's an honor to, come and talk to you all about, what's happening with the zoo and where we're basically, what the challenges we're facing now, but not only with COVID, but also with a global wildlife crisis that, is going on really as we speak. So that's something I'd like to touch on with you. And then at the end, we'll be able to have question and answer, and you really bring up anything you'd like to talk about, whether it's the zoo or wildlife issues. So let me start right off the top with the topic here, which is the Oakland Zoo global conservation projects, and then I'll touch a little bit about how COVID-19 has been affecting the zoo. But there are many, many dimensions to the zoo. Everybody, I could talk to you about the history of the zoo, the new developments of the zoo, the different kind of exhibits, the makeup of our collection, the education programs. There's so many different aspects to the zoo that really drive what we are. But tonight, I really want to, especially because you all are from Oakland, you're familiar with the zoo and how much fun it is to bring your family, how much fun it is to come with friends. But there's a much more serious side to the Oakland Zoo and zoos in general. So if I preface it by telling you that the zoo world in the United States is the 3rd leading contributor to field conservation projects worldwide, you will get a sense that we're more than just exhibiting animals. And what we're actually doing is providing a forum to talk about wildlife and environmental education. We're also there to actually not just have the animals here, but what can we do to help animals in the wild, in the field? And so that's really kind of tonight's topic, to focus on what the Oakland Zoo is doing globally to help wildlife in the field, to help the wildlife populations, wherever they may be. So next slide. So first of all, how do we, this is full screen now?
Yes.
Okay. So how do we get there? How do we get our resources to really play a role in field conservation projects? Well, everybody that comes to the zoo, whether they realize it or not, are becoming active participants in wildlife conservation, because we take 50 cents from them. And when you take enough 50 cents from enough people, every year it generates about $250,000. So about 200, we probably contribute to field conservation projects globally, the Oakland Zoo, somewhere between $350,000 to $450,000 per year. The balance of the monies, if we generate about 250,000 from our visitors who are visiting, the rest of it comes from individual donors, and it comes through fundraisers that we may do for a special project. So it results in real money that we can then turn over to partners and share in the cost of what it takes to actually protect wildlife in the wild. Okay, so here are some of our partners. We actually have 25 different partners with the Oakland Zoo globally. And so we try to focus on some of our field conservation projects are locally, regionally, across North America, and then Asia, Africa, and South America. So if you look to the far left, you're really looking at the different conservation projects. And I'll just read them to you because it may be hard for you to read. The Bay Area Cougar Action Team, which is called BayCat. The ENI Initiative, which you'll hear more about in a video that I will be showing you. ENI means buffalo, and we're in partnership with the Blackfeet Indians in western Montana to reintroduce buffalo to the American West. The Golden Gate Audubon Society, right here in the San Francisco Bay Area. Those are just some of the partners we have. But we also partner with Pinnacles National Park, and we will be partnering with Glacier National Park with buffalo, but Pinnacles National Park because of our condor project. And again, you'll see a video of that in just a minute. But so as part of our effort to help the California condor be reintroduced to the wild, the Ventana Wildlife Society is in Big Sur, much like where it's a reintroduction point. There are 5 points of reintroduction for the California condor. The Pinnacles National Park, Ventana, Los Angeles, Mexico, and the Grand Canyon. So we provide veterinary care for the condors that get into lead poisoning problems at Pinnacles National Park. Anyway, so then the next column over is Big Life and the Amboseli Trust for Elephants. Those are projects that actually help, we assist with ranger patrols and research projects in Kenya to protect the elephant populations in that region. And as you go right even further, now we're getting into Asia. The Awasla Lions is another lion project in Uganda, and Badongo is one that you'll see in a minute in Uganda. That is a national forest reserve that has chimpanzees. All right, and then so it just goes on. So the Caminando is a jaguar project. You'll see that more in a minute. The important point about this slide is to show you the breadth of involvement of where we have conservation partners in the field who are actively working to protect the wildlife in their natural habitats. And it's not just having the animals here at the zoo. Okay, so the next one, this one, the Conservation Society of California. Just for everybody's information, the city of Oakland owns the Nolan Park and the Oakland Zoo. So they've contracted out the management to the Conservation Society, a nonprofit organization, which is the Conservation Society of California. It started out in the late 1930s as the Alameda County Botanical and Zoological Society. It changed its name down the road to the Alameda County Zoological Society. Later on, it changed its name to the East Bay Zoological Society, which was trying to define more and more really who we were. But just about 3 years ago, we decided to change our legal name once again. So the nonprofit organization, which has a board of trustees, and it hires me, and then I hire staff. But that nonprofit organization, and when you become a member of, when you become a member of the Oakland Zoo, is the Conservation Society of California. And why did we change our name? We changed our name this time because we basically, uh, our self-image was that it's more than just running the Oakland Zoo. And we actually have had offers of 2 different donors for off-site conservation centers, one up in Tehama County and another one right here near the Delta. That means that we may be down the road in a position to manage multiple sites above and beyond just the Oakland Zoo. So, and because our members when you buy a membership, you become a member of this Conservation Society of California. Our members range from just within the state. We do have out-of-state members, but just within the state, we have members that go as far north as Ukiah and as far south as San Diego. And so to have being called just the East Bay Zoological Society was really dated and not reflective of who we are. But as the core of our mission is conservation, making the Conservation Society of California as the new name for the nonprofit organization made tremendous sense to us, and we went ahead and did that. So here's some of the conservation projects that we're deeply involved in. Just on site, where if you came up to the Oakland Zoo and you went behind the scenes, we have staff delegated to projects that you're now seeing in front of you. So the Western Pond Turtle, which is being in working with Sonoma State University to reintroduce the Western Pond Turtle, which is the only California native turtle, but it's in tremendous decline here in California. We're actually working to raise them for reintroduction to the wild. We've just received in the past week the riparian brush rabbit. The reason we have those in our veterinary hospital at this time is because there's a hemorrhagic disease that is striking native rabbits throughout the state, especially moving up the state from Southern California. And so what we've done is we're working in partnership on all of these species with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. And our role in this one is they've captured up 20 rabbits to test and develop a vaccine for the hemorrhagic disease that might in fact wipe out this species, which is the riparian brush rabbit, from the state, the way it's spreading because it has such a high mortality rate. Meanwhile, you've got other things like the California Condor Recovery Program, where we're working with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to reintroduce condors into the wild. You'll see more of that in a video clip. But then we also have, before you go there, we'll also have the mountain lion initiative. So some of these species that you see before you are intended to, what we do is we do a project that helps them restore their numbers in the wild. Something like the mountain lion initiative is where their numbers are up, but they are running into what's called human-wildlife conflict. And so whenever they wind up having for some reason, orphan kittens, because the mother has been injured or killed usually by automobiles, sometimes by poachers, or legitimate permit, but they wind up having kittens that are now orphaned, and they will if they aren't taught how to hunt, they will die in the wild. There's no doubt about it. So when they're found, they're brought to the Oakland Zoo. You'll see more of that, but that's not so much a project that is based on trying to restore the population to California. It's to help California Department of Fish and Wildlife manage the human and wildlife conflict that goes on because of it. Okay, but here's, I'll speak just a few seconds about mountain yellow-legged frogs. This is a native species that no one would normally even think of, but in the high mountain lakes of the Sierras, there is the mountain yellow-legged frog. There is a global crisis going on amongst amphibians, literally worldwide, which is a chytrid fungus that is basically a fungus that infects the skin of amphibians. And because amphibians breathe through their skin, by basically infecting the skin, they suffocate to death. This, and again, it's a fungus that no one really understands why there's such an explosion that is affecting the amphibians, because it could be global warming, but it's affecting temperate species as well as tropical species. And so that's what's kind of odd about that. It may not just be global warming that is the root cause of this fungal infection affecting amphibians. So where do we come in? So what we do is we're working with California Fish and Wildlife. They capture tadpoles from the remaining lakes, and the intent is to pull them off, vaccinate them so that from the chytrid fungus, and then reintroduce them. But especially the way the fungus seems to work as epidemiologically is that it sweeps through native habitats, 100% loss of the animals in that region, the amphibians in that region. And then the intent is, as that wave passes, then it allows for us to then reintroduce, in this case, the mountain. There are actually 3 different native frog species found only here. So if they wound up being lost, they would be lost forever, because it would be a matter of extinction. That's the role the Oakland Zoo is now playing in this process of raising the tadpole, saving the tadpoles from being destroyed in the mountain lakes of the Sierras, brought to the Oakland Zoo, raised into frogs, vaccinated, and then returned them back into the mountain lakes of the Sierras. But it's another example of zoos playing a key role, because our expertise is in management of animals, to then turn that around and be able to help make a contribution to wildlife in the wild. Okay, so then we also do advocacy. So we're on we're trying to be at the front edge of saying no to plastics. Plastics, as you all probably are very well aware, are getting into our waterways, which leads to the oceans, and there's a monster amount of plastics that are getting into the ocean. There is no good recycling way out of this mess. And so the only way that, and plastics are really the nuclear waste of our age. They do not break down, they do not go away. They do go into the oceans and contaminate the oceans and cause all kinds of havoc on the wildlife populations in the oceans. And so the real answer to this is that just say, because you can't recycle your way out of it, and I'll give you an example. 9% of plastics are basically recycled today. They're expecting to triple the amount of plastic production in the coming years. And so that's what we're being confronted with. And meanwhile, it destroys animal populations in the oceans themselves. So as advocates for wildlife, the Oakland Zoo, we have these three statues that are out in the zoo now. And what they are made out of little pieces of plastic that have washed up on shore from the oceans in Oregon, and then they picked up on the beaches by volunteers, and then made into an artist puts these all together to create these sculptures to draw the attention about what plastics are doing to our environment and what they're doing to the wildlife in the oceans. All right, so what we try to do at the zoo is link our animal collection to projects in the wild. And so we have a chimpanzee project in the wild in Uganda. We have 2 elephant projects to help save elephants that we fund and we support in Kenya. And it's because if we have a chimp exhibit here at the zoo, or if we have a grizzly bear exhibit at the zoo, or a condor exhibit, or an elephant exhibit, we try to, as much as possible, then have a correlation with the field projects that we try to support elephants in the wild to help them maintain their population. So we do that with a number of species here at the zoo to not only help the wildlife population that we're talking about, but also to encourage people to be engaged with the elephants and become a part of the solution and help support conservation efforts that are going on worldwide. Okay, and now we can go to show you a video, and this will highlight the chimpanzee project that is in the Budongo Game Reserve, Forest Preserve in Uganda. Carefully at this leg on this chimpanzee. Do you see what's missing a foot? Okay, that is because they set out snares. We support these eco guards to go find bushmeat snares. That's how many snares they have collected. This is part of the education programming we support for the local community.
I want you to read for me this. A different group member who is loud.
This is Oakland, the chimp. And that's the baby.
The snares are put out for bushmeat. This is our 2 employees in Uganda.
Oakland Zoo has been for over the 20 last years has been sponsoring our snare removal team, whom we now call the Eco Guards. Oakland Zoo also sponsors some of the community work we do with the children, so that we teach the children on how to conserve. How can the children be our ambassadors in the communities? How can they teach their parents that actually setting the traps? As Budongo Conservation Field Station, we are grateful to the Oakland Zoo. We love the partnership we've had over the years, but most importantly, we love the friendship we've built with some of the staff. And we think that through this friendship and the partnership, it's going to be just a sustainable conservation for us and the chimps. So we really thank the Oakland Zoo for all the support and the love they have had for the chimps and for Budongo Conservation Field Station.
The little baby chimp when they have the white face. Okay, so the reason they put out the snares is because they come into the forest preserve, the surrounding community. Some people, poachers, will come into the forest preserve and set those wire snares that are so that they can capture bushmeat. So they aren't really going for the chimpanzees, but the chimpanzees invariably get their leg or arm trapped in the snare and they can't get out, and it gets progressively tighter until it cuts off circulation. And then if they can get to the chimp in time, if they don't get to the chimp in time, it dies. If they get to the chimp in time, they wind up having to amputate. But it's related to the bushmeat trade, and the local people from the local community actually illegally go into the game reserve to try to get bushmeat to eat. But it has a devastating effect to chimpanzee populations in this game park. And we've been supporting 4 rangers' annual salary. You know what that costs? $10,000, $2,000, $3,000 per ranger per year. What it does is so over 20 years we've been supporting through fundraising activities and the other things I mentioned that allow us to help have them collect the snares and protect the chimps. Okay, so the next clip I'm going to show you is going to be, we're now going to show you another video. This is about the bison project that we have with the Blackfeet Indians in western Montana. It started with bringing 100 buffalo down with the Blackfeet from Elk Island National Park in Canada down to, and that's what we're doing here. So the national park has to surplus bison because they wind up having too many. They've been loaded up in Canada and they're heading for Montana. We funded this transfer of bison so that it could return bison to the Blackfeet culture after 100 years. So now part of our arrangement is 13 of those animals then have come to the Oakland Zoo. So 13 out of that 100 have gone from Canada to Montana to the Oakland Zoo for a breeding program. And all the calves go back to the Blackfeet in Glacier National Park. So here's when they arrived. And 10 out of the 13 turned out to be pregnant. And so we wound up with 23 before we even had a chance to, there you go. All the red ones are the babies. So we raised this first group and then returned them back to, here's our bison exhibit at the Oakland Zoo. Now we take 11 and send them back to Montana. This was featured by the San Diego Zoo, and you'll see that in a second.
Here at the Oakland Zoo, you can meet fascinating animals from all around the world. But one of the most special animal residents is one that historically was found right in their own backyard.
It's a great collaboration for us. It is connecting the people from Northern California to the Blackfeet Nation, and then also with the national parks that are up here. I think what zoos can do that are special is that we can do breeding programs and we can do education programs that reach a lot of people. And that's our primary role.
The only animal in our stories, and I regret to use the name animal, they are beings. They were given to our people. It also serves as our economy. In this case, the economy of the Americas was on the backs of the buffalo, the Iini. It gave us order, it gave us law.
Yeah, so the Bison Project is one of our most exciting projects because there's an effort amongst conservation organizations to rewild the American bison, reintroduce the American bison to the American West as free-ranging wildlife, not as livestock. They are not, you know, they're more like deer and elk than they are like livestock. And so we're trying to create areas for them to be free-ranging and in natural populations in the American West, much as they were. And it became very vital to the Native American populations, because the Plains Indians, because like the Blackfeet, because for basically when we were at war with the Indians, government policy was to slaughter the bison to take away the food source. And defeat the Indians in the wars, and so that's really why they lost the buffalo to their culture uh, which was the essence of their culture, being one of the Plains Indians. And then they lost it for 100 years. When we brought the bison down from Canada, Elk Island National Park, to them, it was the first time that they had bison within their reservation for over 100 years. Okay, so let's see, what else? Okay, the next one, before here, I'm going to show you a video about our California Condor project. So the California Condor, as I mentioned, has 5 release points. And the reason that they went all the way down to 22 birds left on the planet. And because it's native to the Western region, it's native to from Oregon all the way down to Mexico, and then east. It went all the way to Kansas, but it had become a remnant population, and it went down to 22 birds. So San Diego Zoo, Los Angeles Zoo, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and Audubon in the early 1980s pulled all 22 out of the wild and started a captive breeding program. And so the reintroduction is, so now they're up to about 400 birds, 200 of which are in captive breeding programs. The other 200 have now been reintroduced into the wild. And so, but there's one catch. What drove them so close to the edge of extinction? And it's still out there. And right now it's lead poisoning. And so as hunters use lead bullets, they typically will shoot an animal. Sometimes if it's a wild boar, they don't even want the animal, they leave it. Or it goes off wounded and it dies on its own. The condors, being a vulture, go right to the carcass and start to consume it. They go right to the open wound because it's attractive, and that's where there are shards of lead bullet that are still in the wound. So they come to us with lead poisoning. So in Pinnacles National Park, they capture up every bird they can, and they do a field test for lead level in the blood. If they test high, they come to the Oakland Zoo. And so what we do is then treat them for lead poisoning, drop their lead level in the blood. Once it gets to a safe zone, we send them back to Pinnacles, and they're re-released. It's one of the most important conservation projects we're involved with right here at the zoo itself. And so with that, we are now going to show you another video. So this is the treatment protocol. Adam has caught up, they're weighing the bird. We're treating with a drug called calcium EDTA, which binds up lead and allows the kidney to excrete it. And we also give them some fluids to the skin. That's in case you ever need to know, that's how you hold a condor.
But if you're like this, then you're doing the bird a disservice because they.
We also radiograph them and have to get the remaining lead pellets that might be in.
Oh, you know what? I haven't palpated her crop, and you guys did left side.
In the crop. We have now treated over 30 birds, and all been released back into the wild. You don't want the beak to get a hold of your arm. So that's a condor up close. But this is what it's all about. After treatment, this is why we do what we do. Okay, so let me take you to another one. And that is what happens when a mountain lion, the mother winds up missing. And because they get out at night, I mean, they are out at night, and they oftentimes will get hit by a car and leave orphans. So when we were building the California Trail, we actually, put the word out to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and we said, we're about to do a mountain lion exhibit. If you have any orphan kittens that can't go back into the wild, we can provide a home for it. And they said to us, how many would you like? We said, okay, well, we'd like 3. And so they brought us 12 over time. And that's the extent of the problem. And so what happens is then you get an undernourished kitten, dehydrated, starving. They find it, they bring it to the Oakland Zoo. So it's another one of our partnerships with California Department of Fish and Wildlife. And so I think we have a video for this too. So we'll show you give you an idea about a kitten that was brought into our facility. This kitten is under anesthesia, just to let you know.
Where are you going to get your blood for the BG and pill protein?
Maybe also after this.
Okay.
One of them is blown from last night, but she actually had really good vessels considering her state.
What we do is we draw blood, treat it for fleas, give them antibiotics, give them nutritional support, IV fluids. This is our veterinary team that you're seeing. This is at the Oakland Zoo. We were very fortunate to have a capital campaign that raised $12 million for our veterinary hospital at the zoo.
Alex, I didn't realize how fast this was flowing. She got 225 IV.
Oh, okay. That's fine.
Do you want to stop the sub-Q then? She's gotten...
You get your towel fixed?
Yes.
Your towel broken?
I'm no longer trapped by the towel. So I'm pretty much only going to have her head covered.
Can you help with her body?
We might be able to. You can face her towards the tree. Can we look at her head?
You guys go for me to let go back?
Yep.
Yep.
She doesn't really have a lot of ventral flexion. Usually they have a lot of cervical ventral flexion, the felines, if their potassium's low. So.
Good job, ladies.
Go team.
There you go. Now here we go again. This is a release. This is actually the cat that came in from the baseball stadium over on the Embarcadero a couple of weeks ago. So we put a collar on it so we could keep track of where it went. All right. We're almost wrapped up here. So let me show you, I'll talk a little bit about our California Wolf Center. The wolf is one of the species on the California Trail that is native to California, was missing from California for 100 years until one male crossed back in from Oregon and then went back to Oregon, then came back and had basically a litter, and they have their own pack. So there's now 2 packs in Northern California. We support the California Ranger Patrol for wolves, because it's really to work with local ranchers so that they do not just go out and eradicate the wolf again. Because it is a California native. It had just been missing from California for 100 years. And so we really need to have an ongoing, constantly ongoing program with the local ranchers up there so that they can learn to live, manage their livestock in a safe way that doesn't draw in the wolves to get them into trouble. And it's very likely that the population of the wolf in Northern California is only going to expand. The last wildlife video I'll show you is about our jaguars. So we had added 8 new species to our when we opened the California Trail. The jaguar is, like the wolf, is a native species, but the wolf came back and the jaguar still has not, for obvious reasons. But what because we have a jaguar exhibit here at the zoo, we also have field conservation projects. So what we do is support the research to track in Panama the habitat, the locations through camera traps in where they are in Panama, in the jungles of Panama, because they're working to create a corridor that jaguars can thrive in that connects one population to the next population. But they need to know where they are and what the population densities are. That's the research we support. And we support it by providing camera traps to see them at night. And so now we're now going to show you another video. This is a short one. So this is the night. This is the camera trap that researchers put out. Here's the, this is also a jaguar. That's the melanistic color. And that one's all the way down in Southern California. So very quickly, I'll tell you about where we are with COVID. You probably heard all about it, all the battles we were having. We have now, because we're not, the outdoor portion of the zoo have been allowed by the public health. I've had to close the high touch areas like the children's play areas, the indoors restaurant, and the indoor exhibits. But otherwise, we're back open for business. Bit of we can't run our rides area for the kids, but it does mean that we're able to be open at least, and after being closed for 4 months. And we came very close to being in a crisis that we couldn't get out of as far as how much reserve we were using up. Normally it costs about $2 million per month to run the Oakland Zoo. We've reduced it down to about our minimum, which is $1.2 million per month. And we only had about 3 months of reserves left. And that's what the crisis was. Fortunately, the state and the Alameda County Public Health Department has now allowed us to open. And so, you know what? Let me show you one more clip. It's a minute and a half. It was on national news, and it's this little girl who basically gave us her $5 of her tooth fairy money to help us in our time of crisis. And her mother put it on the Facebook and raised, I'll let her tell you. Go ahead and run this video. The total was $225,000 that she lives in Castro Valley, and she just wanted to help the zoo. And so that's what it turned into. So, you know, I'll be open to questions now if you want to do the conversation portion.
Wow. That is very, oh my God. That is very inspiring, seeing a young girl, you know, when you have that willpower and just like the idea, that's amazing that she was able to help the zoo in that.
We're gonna have to make her a Rotarian.
I think she's a Rotarian in the works. Okay, so I'm gonna open this up for Q&A. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and I will turn it over now to Jolene to ask the questions. And if any of you are interested in sticking around afterwards, we will have breakout sessions to continue the conversation, depending how long the Q&A goes.
Thank you, Brandy. Thank you, Dr. Parrott, for a really great presentation. I have lots of questions actually that came in, and ooh, I'm blurry. But it's so I may jump around a little bit, but just to go back to the fundraising that just happened for the COVID crisis at the zoo, outside of her amazing grassroots fundraising that they did via Facebook, I mean, we saw calls going out on the news and on the radio. How did the general population of the Bay Area respond? I mean,
it was heartwarming. We had, believe it or not, we had over 10,000 donors. And many of them were not even on our the list, had never given to the zoo before. And it resulted in in a 30-day period, resulted in $2.8 million to allow us to see what we have to do in the summer is build up a reserve because to get us through the winter, because we don't make enough money in the winter to pay for our expenses. So our pattern is business model is to build up a reserve in the summer, and it carries us through. That amount allowed us to build up enough reserve to now make it to next spring when we can start generating monies again. And out of those 10,000 donors, it ranged from literally a $10 gift to an anonymous donor who gave us $500,000.
wow.
You know, and it was very heartwarming. You know what it really taught me? It taught me, one, how much how the zoo means to our community, but it also taught us how much the community means to us. You know, and so it's something we won't, you know, you can't even forget really ever again.
Sure. Of your standard budget outside of an odd year like this, you talked a little bit about, you know, 50 cents of every ticket sold goes to your conservation efforts, but how does the rest of it break down? I mean, how does the zoo fund itself from ticket sales, donations, corporate sponsorships, that kind of thing?
Yeah, you know, we're one of the lowest publicly supported zoos, you know, through taxes in the country. Normally zoos are about 30 to 35% tax subsidy. Some, like St. Louis, are basically 100%. You know, it's a free zoo. But most zoos get some kind of public support. So if most of them are 30 to 35%, we're about 10%. And so the San Francisco Zoo gets a $4 million subsidy. We get about a $1.4 million subsidy. The rest of the monies are on the backs of running the business, you know. That's why being closed was so devastating for us, because we rely very heavily on our admission prices. So we get money just about any way we can get it, you know. We have a tax subsidy, we have philanthropy, donors, admissions, a rides concession, a restaurant, gift shop, summer education programs, which are called zoo camps, you know, that they do, education programs that are paid for, birthday party that we do, you know, and then so we do it just about any way we can get it, you know. That's what I think the breadth of that is what gives us our financial health. You know, that if one thing vaporizes, then we have something else we can struggle for. And that's where philanthropy just saved us, absolutely saved us.
That's nice to hear. Okay, so back to some of the points that you made in your presentation and some questions that came out of that. You said that the wolves were bouncing back, but the jaguars weren't, for obvious reasons. What are the obvious reasons?
Oh, it's a predator. I mean, you know, so the wolf is actually a very shy animal. It's not the horrible, you know, thing that fairy tales make it out to be at all. You know, the jaguar is a true predator. You know that you know, most people think jaguars are Amazonian jungle, which they are. But they come up through, they're in Central America and they're in Mexico. So there's a good, healthy population of jaguars in the mountains of Mexico. But not to, it's been in very recent times. Twice now, a jaguar came into New Mexico and stayed. So it became a resident. It was later poached, but then another one has now taken up residence in southern Arizona. And it's very quiet because they don't want it to be poached. So can it expand its range once again to come into Southern California? There are those of us who hope so. But they used to range all the way up to San Francisco. And the last one was killed in California in 1857 on the Monterey Peninsula. So the jaguar is very much a California native. And so part of the story of our California Trail collection is not just animals that are in tremendous decline, like the condor, which you can see when you come to the zoo. But it's also species that are California native, but they aren't even here anymore. And one of them is on our state flag.
Yeah.
Grizzly bear is a California native.
Right.
We put it on the flag and then we've eradicated it. But there is hope, because when you take something like the wolf, it vanished for 100 years. When it was reintroduced into the mountains of Montana and Idaho, those populations really took off and expanded into eastern Oregon. And that population expanded into Northern California. And so we still only have like 2 packs. But if they're protected and we didn't have to even get a permit to reintroduce wolves to California, right? Now they need a permit to get rid of them. We're hopeful that the wolf will once again be a viable part, just like the mountain lion, that we can learn to live with wildlife in California.
Good. Nice segue. So question on the mountain lion. That kitten was how old, how big, and weighed how much, roughly?
It was about 16 pounds, and it was about 6 to 8 weeks old. And then the one that you saw, the one you saw in there. We've had them various ages, so but that's usually typically when they're coming in. And the ones that we have here at the zoo itself, so that one there. So that cat might be about 18 pounds, but those are all baby markings that you're seeing on the face. And it's spotted. If they didn't have the towel on it, you'd see the spots on the abdomen.
Sure. Okay. Question about your yellow-legged frog. What parts of California is it native to? And the I don't know if it was a fungus you said, or whatever it was that was affecting the skin. If you catch them, can that be treated? Can it be removed?
They haven't had good success with it, but it can be. We can treat it with an antifungal, but it's like there's a white-nosed bat syndrome that occurs in bats too, the same way. Usually once they get it, fungal infections are extremely difficult to get rid of, and they usually die before you even get to them.
Huh. And are they found throughout the state or in particular?
No, actually, so they're in the high Sierra Mountain lakes of Northern California. There's also a comparable, it's not the yellow leg, it's the red leg, that is in the southern part of the state. And it is also being treated for, in part of the vaccination program to help protect those populations in Southern California. But there are Sierras, it's a species that's found up in the Sierras.
Huh. So we had a question about fire season and what the zoo's evacuation plans are for emergencies. What do the animals do?
We basically sheltered them in place in their night houses. But we're actually, fortunately, pretty safe as an environment. The reason are two. The large areas of grasses that may catch fire and burn are invariably in our exhibits where the animals are. They're either grazed down or and they're irrigated. So we can always just turn on the irrigation to dampen down any risk of fire sweeping through here. On top of that, outside of the zoo is 100-acre zoo. It's in a 500-acre park. So the other 400 acres are grazed down by goats as part of the fire assessment district of Oakland. And so they hired out to have herds of goats come through, and they can do 350 acres in about 5 days, and so that is what allows us to be pretty darn fire safe. The only area that is relatively high risk is called the chaparral, maritime chaparral. It's up at the top of the gondola area, if you know the zoo, and that area is, chaparral is made to burn. It replenishes its manzanitas and chamise scrub. Chaparral regenerates itself through fire. Because of fire suppression, it's become a very geriatric collection of chaparral, which puts it at a high risk. But the good thing is it's on the north face of the park. And so it's very low risk of wind catching it and sending the fire, where it could do so much damage. So the animals themselves, in a fire case or even in an earthquake, we're designed to just keep them right here and just put them indoors out of trouble.
So no animals running through Oakland. Good.
No, but a funny thing was when they had the protests in Oakland, somebody put on the social media that a tiger got loose, and I had the mayor call me Sunday night, asking me if the tiger was out.
And what'd you tell her?
I said no. We counted all tigers, and they're all here.
They all showed up for roll call.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with regard to the conservation programs that the zoo participates in, how do you decide what programs to support? I mean, based on the animal type, but then how do you get more specific than that?
Yeah, well, usually we try to start with, what animals do we have in the collection, but we don't have yellow-legged frogs. And so it's with our networking of, and then the conservation organizations apply to us for support. And we like to support two ways. One is financially, because that's the lifeblood of everything. But then also, especially where our staff can be a part of it, and so, and the mountain lion and the condor are the best examples where we not only give money because we don't have that much money to give, but we can provide with our soft costs. So we have our staff help. So it just depends. We take the elephants. I'll tell you how we got so involved in elephants. We have an elephant collection. But then in 1991, you may remember this, we had an elephant keeper killed by an elephant. And so it pulled me into the world of elephant management. And it was a very sordid world. It was rooted in circus management of elephants and the mahouts of India, very brutal. And so to make a long story short, we wound up going to the forefront of a new way to manage elephants that was not brutal. And so instead of having the mahout style of elephant management, we adapted marine mammal training to elephants, which is all positive reinforcement. And they never thought we could get elephants to do what they do without discipline. But it also meant you don't go in with the elephants, and because if you aren't dominant to the elephant, you will get killed. And so we basically, it's a voluntary program. And what it meant was, while we were doing this for the safety of our keeper, it turned out to be so humane to the elephants that it was all a positive experience between them and the keepers. That led to the animal rights people and us becoming at the front edge of elephant welfare. And that led us to the elephant research projects and conservation projects in Kenya. So, it was kind of a route that wound up being, and it took 20 years, but eventually the entire zoo profession was mandated to manage elephants the way the Oakland Zoo innovated the marine mammal training for them. And so it wound up endearing us to both animal rights and the animal conservation projects that are in the field for elephants. So it's just a story to highlight how it comes different ways. And so as we network with people, certain individuals contact me, like with the Blackfeet Indians. That was a contact through me that I knew they were trying to reintroduce bison to the free-ranging state on their reservations. And so much of America has become ranch land. The Indians said, you know what, we've got 1.2 million acres that we can work with on the reservations. And so it led to us in a partnership with the Blackfeet and Glacier National Park.
Wow. Have you had, and not negative experiences, but have you had any conservation partnerships that have not gone the way you hoped?
No, actually, because the field conservationists really like how, so that story I told you about the elephants actually spilled over to more than that species, that's for sure. Many of our species, we have gone towards very much animal welfare here at the zoo. And so because of that, it's endeared us to wildlife biologists because they care very much of that. They're used to seeing wildlife in the wild, in the free-ranging state. It's hard for them to understand wildlife in a captive state. But if you're going to take care of them in like a zoo setting, it's critical that you realize you're keeping them in a captive setting. And it's incumbent upon us to give them a quality of life that is every bit as enriching for them as it would otherwise be in the wild. And so that endears us to field conservation projects. But no, we haven't. We actually have not had anything that hasn't turned into a mutually appreciative relationship, because they wind up needing us. Because the field conservationists do know that we have access to 1 million visitors a year. We have access to a revenue stream that we can divert some of it to them, because that's what they need. So as long as it's not in violation of their ethics, let's say, it becomes a very deep partnership.
Wow. As I'm sure you're aware, being a Rotarian, work in the environment has become our next or latest area of focus for the foundation, the International Foundation. Have you looked at all into finding ways to use Rotary Foundation money to promote your conservation efforts?
I haven't, but I do want to encourage you all there are so many good causes that to get involved, to get involved in the conservation efforts. We're all very at high risk of being overwhelmed by the tsunami of global warming, because that's going to single-handedly drastically change so many habitats around the globe. That's kind of lurking in the background and it's coming to the foreground. But in the meantime, we have specific species that we're trying to save, because if we save a certain species, it actually saves the entire ecology around them. And so the conservation movement and the world of environmental protection is one of those that is in great constant need. And I would really encourage you all and Rotary itself to be actively involved in different conservation projects. And some of them actually, we in Oakland number 3, we have a project in Guatemala. A lot of times, but you have to really invest in the community, surrounding community, so that they don't go into the forest preserve and poach animals.
One more question on the environment. You talked a little bit about plastics, and I think you said 9% is being recycled. Is that because only 9% is being turned in for recycling, or is that what we're capable of recycling.
Oh no, it's because it's not being turned in, you know. And then, you know, it's a disappointing world for me because we have banned single-use plastics from the zoo. We're the only zoo in the state to do it, and the rest of the zoos better get on board. You know, I'm telling you. Anyway, we've banned single-use plastic. We use it only if we have no other alternatives, and we're trying to promote it with people to do it. But the 9% is because a lot of the plastics aren't even recyclable. So I went down to the Union City Recycling Center, and I was actually shocked. The only thing they really want are, you know, big plastic jugs and the single water bottle. But most of that never makes it to them. All the other plastics, the little clam buckets for your deli sandwich, that's not recycled. That will be separated at the recycling center and sent to the landfill. They don't even recycle it. And
That's
so when you really look at all that, you begin to understand it's a toxic waste that is contaminating our environment. And we have to, glass is great, aluminum is great, whatever, but our reliance on plastic has to be reined in, and just don't use it in the first place. Then you don't have to worry about recycling.
Wow, that's heartbreaking. So we had one more question about volunteer opportunities at the zoo. I know you have some volunteer docents and things like that, but are there other kinds of things that concerned citizens can get involved in?
Oh yeah, we'd love to have people involved in our, basically we have docents, so if you like to do education programming, we have youth Team Wild Guide program, which also interfaces with the public and tells them about otters at the otter exhibit, that type of thing. We have animal care volunteers. We have a lot of those actually that basically, you know, go out and help. They work right next to the keeper. So the keeper has a brown shirt, they have a green shirt, they do the exact same thing. And they'll prepare enrichment items for the animals, which enriches their day, kind of a thing. But then they also do the old cleaning, get the rake, distribute the browse, you know, that kind of stuff. But then we also have teams of volunteers. So let's say your club wanted to do and we do it with corporate a lot, where some department of Clorox wants to have a team building day. So they come out, they work with us, and then Google does it a lot too. They'll come out and they'll hit hard an exhibit where we have to get rid of the invasive plant species. So they're out there pulling and chopping and digging things up, you know. And then of course we have on the donor side where we have support for special events and things like that. But there's more than that. That's just the tip of the iceberg. But we have 780, how many volunteers?
Yeah,
780 volunteers, ongoing volunteers that help us. And I'll tell you, the zoo could not function without them, because that would add another several $100,000 to our budget, which we wouldn't be able to do.
Wow. Does the zoo, you said it's 100 acres of a 500-acre park. Does the zoo have any plans in the books for further expansion or additional exhibits or things you'd like to see happen once we get back to some kind of reality?
Well, you know, no, I think we're big enough, and our neighbors think we're big enough. You know, so when I started, we were a 25-acre zoo. This is a long time ago. This is 38 years ago. So we were a 25-acre zoo. Then we added our elephant exhibit and a couple others. We were at 45 acres for quite a while. We just added 56 acres, so we're about 100 acres now. And that is, believe it or not, the same footprint as the San Diego Zoo and the Los Angeles Zoo. And so and if we tried to go any further in Nolan Park, we'd need permission from the city council. I guarantee you the neighbors were so mad at us just for that 56 acres that we've got plenty to work with. And we were actually going to be looking more now at areas off exhibit conservation breeding programs. And so that's what the Tehama County, you know, we had a donor who bought 5,000 acres. It wound up just for us to do a conservation project. For various reasons, had to do with zoning in Tehama County, the planning department up there, that he got discouraged and he canceled the project. But but the main thing is to talk about off-site conservation projects, which is where we have areas for growth, especially in the number of acres that represents the Oakland Zoo.
Well, thank you. That's it for questions for me, Madam President.
Thank you so much, Dr. Parrott. I mean, we usually save some time for a breakout, but this talk was just really interesting overall. And I think the questions that we had going on, there's just so much, there's so much fascination with the zoo. To show our thanks, Dr. Parrott, as you know, we're donating a couple of polio vaccines in your name. As you know, Rotary is very committed to ending polio, and we've been working on eradicating the disease for more than 30 years. And there was actually news about 10 hours ago, the WHO published that Africa is no longer a region with polio. So all that's left is Afghanistan and Pakistan. So we're really close to eradicating disease, and we thank you for your time, and to try to also honor it with this donation in your name.
Great, thank you.